They're huge and will enable us to make a reliable diagnosis.
Dr. Dubinsky withdraws 80 millimeters of liquid from the cyst that had built up on the tumour. It's a huge relief for the brain. The surgeon hopes it will be for his patient as well. Thanks to the robot, the procedure takes just 1 hour instead of the usual 2. Once the samples have been analysed, the two doctors can decide on the next steps for their patient.
And now it's your turn. Whip out that fitness mat. Personal trainer Aurelia Dallmann is going to show us a new exercise.
Hello, today we train our back. So you lay on the floor, lift your feet, then straighten your arms, and then go with your hands to your butt. Back forward, squeeze your butt and your lower back. Forward again, and with your hands to your butt. With this exercise, you train your whole back. So your lower back is in the most, but your whole back will be trained. You should do about 50 reps. So do as many as you can, do a little break, but in the end you should have 50 reps.
Have fun practicing, and we'll see you next time on In Good Shape.
If I could go back and change it all, I would. I think I'm gonna miss you the most. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Maybe it's just the little moments. If I could go back and change it all, if I could go back, I would. But I can't.
Welcome to the Budget and Policy Committee of Denver City Council. This session of the Budget and Policy Committee begins now.
Thank you for joining Denver City Council's Budget and Policy Committee. I'm Council President Stacy Gilmore, and we're going to go ahead and get into our introductions. We're going to go ahead and go online first. We've got a few council members who are joining us virtually, and so we'll go online and then come back into the chambers.
For the Times, Denver's Perfect 10.
All right, thank you. I believe we're also going to have Councilwoman Seda Baca joining us virtually as well. And we're going to go ahead and come back to chambers and start with Councilman Flynn for introductions here.
Thank you. Good morning. Good morning. Good afternoon, everyone, and celebrating Juneteenth today. And my name is Kevin Flynn, Southwest Denver's District 2.
Good afternoon, Paul Cashman, South Denver, District 6.
Good afternoon, Joel Clark, District 7.
Good afternoon, Amanda Sawyer, District 5.
Good afternoon, Kendra Black, District 4.
All right, well, thank you. And we've got our ongoing conversation with Councilmember Black and representatives from the Clerk and Recorder's Office as well. And we'll go ahead and delve into the next presentation for the ballot measure reform conversation.
Great, thank you. I've got a long presentation. Some of the slides are repetitive from previous presentations, and I'll skip over them. And I even put some of them at the end of the presentation just in case any of you want to refer to them. Today we're going to talk about the ballot information booklet. We started that conversation a couple weeks ago. We'll continue talking about that, and related to that are timelines and the council referral process. Again, the ballot information booklet is intended to inform voters, and in 2018, Clerk Deborah Johnson brought this ordinance to us, and the Denver City Council passed it. And as a reminder, Denver is the only city in Colorado that produces a ballot booklet for non-Tabor issues. So these are some of the issues that were identified with the ballot booklet last year. I won't go over them because we talked about them in depth last week, but they are there for your reference. This is sort of a summary of some of the key points we talked about on June 6th. If the ballot information booklet is not providing accurate, balanced information, should it be eliminated? Does the ballot information booklet clearly convey that the statements are submitted by council, proponents, public, and that pro and con comments are not verified? The voters should know that they can get more information elsewhere. Pro statements should not be advocacy, and council members should be able to write their own pro-con. However, I'll point out that in the ordinance it says city council shall submit written comments, not a council member. So here are some key questions that I sort of pulled out from that discussion. The first is it important to get more public input and more pro and con statements? And I personally absolutely think that is important. The more information that is submitted, I think it's easier for whoever's looking at the pro and con, the clerk's office or council staff, to see trends of what, generally people are saying in favor and against. I do think it isn't balanced if we never have any con statements. So I'll skip to the third bullet, which is the ballot information booklet balanced if there are no con statements. I don't think it is. The second bullet is, should the public be able to submit both pro and con statements? The public can do that at the state level. Again, I think that we should. I think the more input we have, the better. And then the last bullet is, who is best suited to summarize pro and con. So currently, from the 2018 ordinance and for Tabor, it is the clerk who summarizes the con. In a lot of cities, the legislative body does that because these are legislative items. So the clerk's recommendation is that the clerk will collect and summarize comments in favor and against for initiated and council referred. Currently, as I said, council submits their own pros, citizen initiatives, the proponents submit their own, and the clerk can only summarize the con. And what they're proposing is that the clerk would summarize the pro and the con. Okay, so there's that, and all along, every time I've presented to you, I've come to you with various ideas for a team. So I've learned a lot during this process, and so this is my latest idea after talking to a lot of people. And remember, the whole goal for me is to make the ballot information booklet better, so it's a better tool for the voters. And we have a lot of timeline issues with the ballot information booklet. and the fact that we are sometimes not getting comments against. So I have this idea. Again, devil is in the details, but I have met with our central staff, with Anshul and Benita and Zach, and we talked about this idea. So we already have a review and comment that is conducted by a city attorney and the Denver City Council director or designee. So for this year, it's been John Griffin and Zach, and they've done review and comment for both Tabor and non-Tabor. The idea that we developed a few weeks ago about ballot title, if you recall, the idea was that council would write an initial draft of a ballot title, and then we would submit the initial draft to the clerk's office. So this idea is that this team, so they're going to be experts because they're already doing the review and comment. So now they'll have the ability to draft a draft title that they'll send to the clerk. And then this team will solicit and receive pro and con comments even before an initiative makes the ballot or council refers. The reason I'm proposing that they could receive comments before the initiative makes the ballot or council refers is because the timeline is so tight there for November election. It's so tight at the end of the summer. The state, for example, knows what's going to be on the ballot in early May. So they have 150 days, but they close the comment period at 50 days. So they have all that time. So they are soliciting and receiving those comments. So if an initiative ends up not making the ballot, okay, so we don't have to worry about it, but this would just be more robust, and we would do outreach, and we could possibly work up with our communications team to do more outreach, to get more people learning about what we're doing, what the citizen initiators are doing, and get feedback. We would do that for non-Tabor measures. Because of state law, we couldn't do it for Tabor, but we could certainly share with the clerk's office any information that we gathered. This team would also be really knowledgeable about measures. They would, monitor the city council process, monitor how signature gathering is going, monitor the media. So they would be knowledgeable about the measures. And then before 60 days, before the election, these same people, our council attorney and the city council director or designee, and a designee from the clerk and recorder's office could summarize the pros and cons for non-Tabor. And then again, different rules for Tabor, but perhaps our team could help the clerk's office if they need it. So there is that idea. And I'm going to keep going. I'd like to get through my whole presentation and do questions at the end, but just noodle that for a bit.
Councilwoman, while you're transitioning, and I think that sounds great for you to get through your presentation, and then we'll follow up with questions or comments from members of council. Want to welcome Council Pro Tem Torres to the meeting, as well as we have Clerk and Recorder Lopez with us in chambers as well. Go ahead, Councilwoman.
Okay, great. Okay, so remember that was one of the clerk's recommendation, was that that the clerk's office would summarize. Okay, so another recommendation is that we would change the deadline for the fiscal analysis to 70 days from 60. So that would give the Department of Finance a couple more weeks to do the fiscal analysis. This is a repeat of a slide, but because currently council has to refer about 60 days before, it's really challenging for the Department of Finance. And so I've been talking, for over a year now about creating some kind of council timeline and process. Again, the whole purpose of it is to provide more time for community feedback, conversation, so the voters are more informed at the election. So Here's an idea for a council referral process and a timeline. So if you remember in 2019, we had the Charter Review Committee, and I thought that went really well. Councilwoman Ortega chaired it, and it was sort of similar to this committee. It was a committee of the whole, and I always refer to Councilwoman Sawyer because I thought she did such a great she did such a great job with her ideas, and she came to us with some ideas. She came to the Charter Review Committee a couple of times. She laid out what her idea was. We asked questions, we provided feedback. She came back to the Charter Review Committee with changes. You know, it was give and take. She listened to us. And then once she felt like she had a bill, and it was for a charter change, that we would all support. She had it drafted, and she came to Finance and Governance. And so I thought that went really well. We were all knowledgeable and informed about it, and I just feel like we should do that instead of having these last few weeks in August where we're just major crunch time. Department of Finance is, you know, knee-deep in the budgeting process, and it's just a lot going on, and I think if we just gave ourselves an extra month or two, it would be a better process for us, and it would be a better process for the voters and provide the voters with more information. So that sort of, that slide. And then I thought about timelines. So currently we have to refer usually by the last Monday in August. And I think it should be earlier. I think it should be either, 90 days before the election or 120 days. Again, just so there's more time for discussion and analysis. So here are a couple of examples. So if we did 90 days before the election instead of 60, we would have to refer something by the first week of August for the November election, or the first week of January for a spring election. If we did 120 days out, we would have to refer the first week of July for a November election, or the first week of December for a spring election. Then I also think there should be some kind of timeline to kind of mimic that same process we did at the Charter Review Committee. So this final section where it says example for November election, say we decided we wanted to give ourselves 90 days before the election to refer. So instead of the last day in August, it would be the first day in August. So it gives us an extra month, an extra 30 days. Then it would mean that the bill would come through FinGov kind of mid-July. And then we would need time for budget and policy and for a public process. So I'm just proposing it would be about June 15th, just because of 4th of July kind of takes a week out of that time period. So June 15th would be 145 days before the election, but we could be at budget and policy then and having conversations and letting the public know that what we're looking at. So there's my idea for a timeline. Here are some other things that I'm not really prepared to talk about today, but I just want to kind of plant the seed with you. There's a lot of legislative bodies that require a supermajority in order to refer charter changes. So that's something we might want to consider, charter or constitutional changes. Another thing to think about is if we create a process and a timeline, do we want it to be in the charter, the code, and or rules and procedures, or a combination of those? And do we need to talk about charter change ballot referrals and if they should be allowed to be late filed or direct filed? Okay, so that was kind of my response to the clerk's suggestion that we move the date for the Department of Finance, and I'm totally fine with that, but I also think that we should create our own timeline. Okay, now the next slides are repeats from last week, and I got follow-up information from the clerk's office. So the first one is changing the deadline for candidate petitions for the spring municipal election. So you'll see in red, this is what I got from the clerk's office. So under our current rules for the 2023 election, you would pick up your petitions on January 3rd and you would submit them by February 8th. If we change it to 75 days, you would pick them up on December 14th and you would submit them by January 19th. Okay, and then the next recommendation from the clerk's office is to change the date for withdrawal, and I don't think anyone has any concerns or questions about that. The petition deadline, I still can't really get my head around it, so maybe you guys would like to come up and talk about it. So currently, petitioners have to return their petitions 120 days before the election. They would like to change it to say that the signatures have to be deemed sufficient by 120 days. So if I want to get something on the ballot, the first question I'm going to ask is, what day do I need to turn them in? So I think this is confusing, and we've been back and forth a little bit, but I'll let you guys, let me finish and I'll let you guys come up and explain that. This next recommendation they made was to change the deadline for write-in candidates to file from 15 to 60 days. We talked about that a couple weeks ago. We asked the clerk's office to better explain what the options would be, and this is, I just copied what Ben and Audrey sent to me. So there were two options. One would be to have a special election, and the other one would be to emulate the state process to have a vacancy committee. I still have a lot of issues with this, you know, and I'll let you guys elaborate on that. But if we had, I'm just going to use Council President Gilmore as an example because she's sitting right in front of me. Say she's running for re-election, and a month before the election, she gets an opportunity to go be the Secretary of the Interior, and she moves to Washington. Oh, sorry, Jolyn. Do you wish I would have said that? Darn it. Shoot. So Council President Gilmore gets to be the Secretary of the Interior, and there's one person.
There's plenty of deputy positions.
Yeah, you can be your deputy. Okay, and Council President Gilmore is running against one other person, and so she withdraws, and then that other person will win with one vote. So I don't know if I'm wrong or not, but that does concern me a little bit. But and really, that's all I have. So I'm going to let. Well, do you have questions for me from what I presented on, or if you want to go straight to them responding to those two things, we can do that too.
All right. Well, thank you, Councilwoman Black, for the great presentation and that future visioning session a little bit there. No, I'm just joking. But yes, thank you for the presentation. We've got Councilmember Sawyer is in the queue, and so if you want to go ahead and pose your question, if it's about what Councilwoman Black presented, and then we can definitely bring the clerk and recorder up as well to comment on the slide deck and answer any subsequent questions.
Yeah, if you don't, thank you, Madam President. If you don't mind, I just would like to, I've got a few other questions that I'm happy to hold off on, but just want to, so I've been just thinking through our conversation from 2 weeks ago about the ballot book and how we would manage that, and Councilwoman Kniech's concerns about having, you know, 2 pro statements and then 1 con statement, and that being unfair. One of the things that I thought of that might be a potential solution for that, that I just want to put on the table for everyone to think about, and maybe the clerk and recorder's office can tell us what they think as well, because frankly, I don't even know that this would be allowed under, you know, state law. But My solution that I thought of would be to have the proponents of the initiated ordinance or the charter change or whatever, instead of writing a pro statement, right, their pro statements could go into the pro statements that were included in everyone else's, you know, it could just be public and along with the con statements and summarized by the clerk's office for non-Tabor issues, and that would be fine. But to address the idea of the potential concern for proponents not having a specific voice or their specific message, maybe for that, they would write a problem statement, right? Like answer the question, why are you putting this on the ballot? What problem are you trying to solve? Something like that is, you know, 300 words max from the proponents, that is an explanation for why they have put in the effort to go out there and do the research and create the language and get the signatures and put this on the ballot. And then whatever pro statements come in from the proponents or anyone else, and whatever con statements come in from you know, opponents and anyone else, can be summarized and added to the book. But that way there is an opportunity for the proponents to explain why they have brought this to the ballot for the people, but then doesn't kind of show up as a two pros and a con thing. So I don't know whether that is even possible under state law, but it was the solution that I thought of as I was like noodling this over the last couple of weeks that might work to kind of check all the boxes of concern for all of the different things that we talked about 2 weeks ago. That's all. Thanks.
Okay, great. I wrote it down. Anything else?
All right, great, thank you. Want to welcome Councilwoman Seda to the meeting as well via Zoom, and wanted to give the clerk's office an opportunity to respond to Councilwoman Sawyer's suggestion or idea, and see if you have any early concerns.
And then while you're up, if you could talk more about the petition deadline and then the write-in thing. Just clarify those also.
Okay. Thank you, Councilwoman, Council President Paul Lopez, Denver Clerk and Recorder, Chief Elections Official for the City and County of Denver. There's a few comments, I think, that or a few questions that were up here that we were trying to tally. But for this one, I'll have Audrey come and speak to the deadline, and then the ballot book, and then bench start with my office.
Or did you want to go ahead and respond to Councilwoman Sawyer's idea first, since
that's fine.
What we had out there first, and then
that's fine.
Go ahead.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Madam President. For the record, Audrey Klein, Deputy Clerk and Recorder. Thanks for having me, Councilwoman. If I can sort of maybe restate and make sure that I've got this right. So we're looking for a problem statement that would accompany what is currently in the book by law that would be framing the question?
So yes, is the short answer. So if you recall a couple of weeks ago, a lot of the conversation, Councilwoman Kinich identified a concern with the idea of allowing proponents to write their own pro statement and then summarizing other pro statements that came in if we were going to do the public outreach process, because that would be like two pro statements and a con statement. But I felt very strongly that proponents should have a separate voice of some kind from sort of all other pro statements. They're the ones who've done the work, they're the ones who've been in the weeds, they're the ones who've written the language that's going on the ballot, et cetera. So I was thinking that if they had the opportunity to write a short statement that was a problem statement, right? The proponents have introduced this measure to the voters because blank. You know, because there's something we've identified the city's not doing something about, or there's something we want that we don't feel is being addressed appropriately, or whatever, right? But then that gives them an opportunity as a proponent to explain to voters what problem they're trying to solve and why they have spent all of this effort and time and money to write the language and get the signatures and get it on the ballot, as opposed to the pro and con statements that we're, talking about potentially summarizing, which are statements from everywhere in the public, which is a little bit different. So it was like a solution compromise kind of thing that I came up with. And like I said, I don't even know that it's possible for us to do that. It's legal, but.
I don't see why it wouldn't be possible. I think Councilwoman Kniech, her fairness arguments, I think were very well taken by our office. So I think there's sort of an equality piece there that I think that there's some solutions that you're bringing up that could, proverbially split the baby here, where, it's law, we get to make it up, right? So there's a way to do that so that the proponents still have their own voice. Personally, I think that one of my issues with the municipal information booklet is that we don't actually know who is making these arguments. And I think that that's kind of an interesting piece of the conversation that we haven't really had yet. So there's just the proponents, and then we don't ever really know who the opponents are. So there's interesting ways that we could split that. I don't see why not. Maybe 300 words here, 300 words there, and then expand con to 600. All of these options are on the table. I don't really think that our office has a particular opinion as to which way we go with them. We want to facilitate a good process. But I think your point is very well taken here, that having that framing of an argument is really important to make a good argument. The why are we here and why is this even on the ballot should certainly be part of a pro statement. And if maybe there's a way to reserve space for that, I don't see why not. Correct. Ben makes a really good point that there's a difference between Tabor and non-Tabor on this, but generally what we're talking about here is the non-Tabor stuff. So all of these options are certainly on the table. I don't have a problem from our office, and we'd be willing to work towards a solution if that would be where council wants to go. Great.
Go ahead. Yep.
Should I speak to the 120-day deadline?
Yep, go ahead.
Okay. The councilwoman is correct that this can get really sticky. The purpose of our working towards this 120-day deadline to be deemed sufficient is because we accept petitions all the time. We're on a rolling basis, and so we kind of need to set a goalpost somewhere. And then the way that our law is sort of framed up is that we are required a maximum of 25 days to verify signatures. So putting the 120 as the day to be deemed sufficient is useful for us. And if you're doing the math and you're trying to get something on the right ballot, you can kind of do the math yourself as well and put another 25 days back. That'd be 145 days. If you have all of the signatures that are required to get on the ballot, that would be a really safe time to do it. You could do it beforehand in case of the very, very rare circumstance where you might go a little longer if you've produced an addendum. That's a piece of law that we haven't talked about in this chamber quite yet. We're happy to, but it is quite rare. So the 25 days is usually sufficient. But if you think you don't have it and you might need an addendum, you can always submit your stuff earlier. So we have those options mainly because you can turn in a petition at any time.
Okay, I've got Council Pro Tem, go ahead, Councilmember Black, and then we've got Council Pro Tem Torres in the queue.
So I get that, but why not just make it 145 days and then anyone, of course you can turn anything in early.
You can. It's really just, we don't want to back up the system too much. Giving people a little bit more time to sort of decide when they want to turn them in is useful for us. It also helps us step out the verification process.
Okay, all right.
Okay, all right, thank you. Council Pro Tem Torres?
Thanks. It was better trying to understand, I think, that process and maybe what you experience. Do folks turn them in when they think they've gotten their number or as they're doing it? And is it a burden on your team to get them in kind of a piecemeal fashion?
We usually require them to be submitted in total. You only are sort of available for an addendum if you didn't hit it. But the more we can space these out, the better. It's a very staff-intensive process. especially if you're talking about having to turn in twice as many as you think you need. So we really get backed up. So giving people that rolling process is its own sort of piece of usefulness there. And it also allows campaigns to sort of decide how they want to campaign. So if they want to get on the ballot a year early, they can pretty much do that. And that allows them to, I don't know, think about fundraising in a different way, think about the way that they're going to market or run this ballot initiative in a different way. And so we don't want to cut off those options for anyone, but this is sort of just the way that the law is currently structured. It's useful.
Okay, thanks. Okay, thank you, Council Pro Tem Torres. Did Clerk, you have anything to add on this, or we can go ahead and transition to the write-in conversation?
Part of it is also, thank you, Madam President. Part of it is also just the operations and the timing throughout there, because people can submit their petitions throughout the year. That means they can do this during election season. And for those of you who haven't turned in your ballot, today's the last day for you to request a ballot, and we can mail it to you for you to turn it in. But other than that, we just advise you to take to the Dropbox. So with that, we could be doing, we could be knee deep in an election or the follow-up through an election and kind of have that back end hit up. So it is very, very labor intensive. You have to have people come in, and that 25-day deadline can be no joke if you have 9 petitions on the ballot. So there's a lot that this can do. You got to think about these things in terms of multiple issues on a ballot, and not just one, as we saw this last cycle. So I don't know, do you want to talk about the vacancy, things like that? Okay.
I'm sorry that I'm being so difficult on this, but if I'm...
No, it's good. I'm glad we're having this conversation, because it would be helpful to just dig into this a little bit
more. So if I'm a member of the public and I want to get signatures for something, I'm not really sure where I'm going to turn them, when I should turn them in. And so and I know we made that deadline, I believe in 2018, because the public wasn't clear. And so this is confusing to me. If I had signatures, I'd be like calling up Alton and saying, now when am I supposed to turn them in? Can I turn them in? I don't know what that means for the public.
We could answer that. We advise folks who filed the petitions, we give them everything they need to know and also what their deadline would be. It's very rarely that somebody would turn in petitions just to be able to qualify or just to be able to kind of figure out and then see what they can go get to make up any kind of discrepancy. They usually come with more than what they need and then turn those in. And they're advised by our office to meet that deadline as hard as possible. What Ben is saying, that we're actually we're very voter-centric, and also we tend to work with petitioners to be able to make sure that they understand what those rules are. And if they do have extra time, we advise them that they have extra time to be able to do that as well too. So we don't provide legal advice per se, but we work with them on a very constituency basis, right? Constituency service type basis. So
I wanted to, something you said, Clerk Lopez, I wanted to make sure I was understanding. So when somebody comes to pick up the petitions, your staff actually let them know, when is a great date for you to get this submitted so that there's plenty of time for your office to verify signatures. And so you're giving them specific information when they come in, and I guess, does that need to be documented somewhere, or is there a legal requirement that then somebody could come back and say, well, we didn't quite get that same level of customer service, and does that become a legal issue?
No, we give them the best customer service that we can through our voter service side of our elections division. They work with the applicants. We're able to, we actually have staff dedicated to that as well too, and I don't know if you guys want to chime in on the other stuff as well. There's a lot of it.
Mm-hmm. And thank you, ma'am. Audrey Klein, Deputy Clerk and Recorder. I'm sorry, and I left this out of my explanation, is that when we're thinking through the timelines, take the upcoming municipal, for instance. When we're starting to talk 100 and 120, 145 days before the election, we're starting to land directly into this general election. So we've been trying to sort of massage these things around a lot of other pieces of the law. So While VSPCs are open, we have a piece of law that says we don't have to do signature verification because we are already fully staffed up trying to get election judges out to do the work that needs to be done for this election. So we've been trying to sort of maneuver these things around and giving ourselves that sort of ability to have petitions come in earlier, and then creating a stop date has been useful to help for the staffing problems because the election judges are oftentimes the same people that we use for signature verification. So some of those timelines start to run into each other when we're talking about an April election that might have a ballot initiative on it and a November election that is going to be a big one like this year. And I'm sorry I left that out before.
Okay, that's great. I appreciate you clarifying that. Councilmember Black, go ahead, and then we also have Councilmember Sawyer back in the queue.
Okay, just to follow up to that, how often do we have a ballot measure on the spring ballot, on the municipal ballot?
Well, when was the last time we did it? Oh, we missed the answer.
Wait.
I missed the question.
He's going to.
How often do we have an
Alden's gonna take a
initiative
look
on the
and read it and
spring
get back to
ballot,
us.
on the municipal time frame?
But I would expect it to be quite frequent.
I'm sorry?
I would expect it to be frequent.
Okay. All right, Councilmember Sawyer?
Thanks, Madam President. While you guys are looking up the answer to that question, which I really appreciate, wanted to clarify the 25-day signature requirement. So is it set by city ordinance or state law or charter or constitution that the clerk's office must verify the signatures within 25 days?
That's city code.
It's in city code, okay. Is 25 days sufficient for the clerk's office?
Depending.
Yeah, it depends on how many you have layered up together.
Okay. The reason I'm asking is because if it's set in city ordinance and one more question before I guess I frame this. On average, how long does it take you to actually verify signatures?
That's also a great question. I asked Todd Davidson, our voter services manager, that recently. He says he can do about 100 signatures an hour per person. And so when we're talking 20,000 signatures, it's a long time.
Okay. So do you find yourselves frequently running up against that 25-day deadline?
Yes.
Okay. So then I guess as we're having this conversation, two questions for you. If it's in city ordinance, we could change it. Do you need more time? Is that something we should consider?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think asking the elections division would be helpful. I think what really gets us in trouble is everyone's trying to make the same deadlines most of the time. So they just tend to stack up on each other no matter what, because everyone's pulling petitions, trying to get on a certain ballot, and there's like a little bit of political calculus involved. So that's why we had 9 at a time 2 years ago. Is that correct? Yeah. So it may not be the length of time, but it certainly could be helpful. Some other options that we've been kicking around are some technology upgrades. Expensive propositions, but I think in the long term, it might save us on the actual personnel time. Mm-hmm. So there's options out there, and most of that is just in our own rule. So it's really just our own capacity that we're trying to assess on those. So if council wants to expand timelines, we're happy to talk about it.
Okay, so I guess I understand Councilwoman Black's confusion about why don't we just make it 145 days, right? Because if you have 25 days to verify signatures and we're talking 120 days before the election, then if we make it 145 days, then it would be verified sufficient by the 120-day deadline. I also understand your concern with timelines and backing up into another election, et cetera. So I guess I'm asking within a few days, right, because dates change. Sometimes elections are, November 7th, and sometimes elections are November 1st, or whatever the case might be. So that would change the deadlines in the background. But if the clerk's office does not accept petitions or verify signatures while ballots are out for a previous election. Would it make sense to, and dates move, so that 120-day deadline might end up somewhere in there, or 145 days if we include that 25 days of signature. Would it make better sense for us to alter the ordinance on the dates to give you all more flexibility on the time to verify the signatures and deem the petition sufficient, instead of making it and then we put in a hard date of 120 days or 145 days or whatever we end up as a body in discussion deciding. Would that make a difference in terms of the ability of the clerk's office to be able to do this better and more cleanly, but also give an actual hard date to people who are trying to petition so that they know they've got to get it in by whatever date?
Thank you, Council President. Councilwoman, I think that's a great offer. However, I want to be able to have a conversation with our voter services team on whether they need that. If you look at the changes that we have and that we've recommended to the council, and those are looked at and analyzed in totality. We spent the good part of last year and the whole part of winter into spring putting this in a timeline so that folks can see what this looks like in the entire timeline. With that, we had, it's true, in this last cycle with 9 petitions, we were able to hit every single one of them out of the park in terms of meeting that deadline. Was it strenuous? Yes. Did it put our team year-round, nonstop on signature verification for those petitions? Absolutely. So we are able to do what is required by the law as it currently is. Now, I think any kind of proposed change or anything like that, Councilman, I would have to have a conversation with the folks that are actually doing it to make sure I understand from them if that is necessarily a stress point for them or not. I know it gets stressful, especially around election time, but that's what we do, right? It's just what we do. So with that, I don't know if anything else. Alton, do you want to answer the other question? Do you have that one on? All right, thank you.
Afternoon, Madam Chair. Alton Dillard, Communications Manager, Public Information Officer, Denver Clerk and Recorder. And I've got an answer to Councilmember Black's question. We had 2 questions on the 2019 municipal ballot, 0 on the 2015, 0 on the 2011, and 1 on the 2007. So it's also important to note in this discussion that municipal elections only occur every 4 years.
All right, very good. Thank you, Alton. We're going to expect those answers like that. You set the bar. So now we're going to be like, okay, we'll just wait and ask a couple more questions and we'll get the answer. But thank you for turning that around really quick. That's very interesting to get that information. We've got Councilmember Sawyer. We've got you back up in the queue.
No, I think
Okay.
I was just in trying to kind of wrap my mind around the deeming something sufficient 120 days and whether that really solves the challenge that the clerk's office is having in terms of timelines. And I think they are going to go back and ask their voter services team, and then we'll know more about that.
Yep. We want to give them an opportunity to go back and speak with the folks that are going to be responsible for getting this done and vet out those different timelines. And hopefully we can continue the conversation or get some feedback at our next budget and policy where we continue the conversation. And knowing that there'll be more information, more of these conversations, because we're not going to get everything wrapped up this go around as well. And so want to also welcome Councilwoman Sandoval, who's joined us virtually via Zoom as well. And Councilmember Black, do you have any other thoughts on the petition deadline conversation? If not, okay, we're good to go. So let's go ahead and move to the timeline for write-in candidates.
Oh,
Good afternoon. I'm Ben Schler. I'm with the Clerk and Recorder's Office. I think Council Member Black had 2 questions about our proposal for moving the write-in date back to the ballot certification date as opposed to 15 days. And the first question was, and Council Member Black, remind me if I get this wrong, but I think the first question was, what happens if a candidate is contested, meaning there's more than one person on the ballot? In that case, under our scenario, and the scenario that we're following is the scenario that is already under state law for unaffiliated candidates. In that case, even if the candidate was contested and there was more than one candidate, if that candidate died, withdrew, became disqualified, or otherwise vacated that office, that candidate would still be entitled to a vacancy committee that they selected when they first filed their petition. That's something I should go back to. The way that you select the vacancy committee is you put it on your petition. It's in front of the people who sign and say, I want this candidate on the ballot, so I should start there. But whether or not you're contested or not, you would still be entitled to have that vacancy committee select a different person for you. And the votes cast for the candidate who's already printed on the ballot, who is vacated, would be counted for that vacating candidate. So I think that that's the first question. And the second question was, what if someone dies, I think?
Could you win with one?
Or gets a nomination to, no, or there's a, they rescind continuing on with the election.
Yeah, in that case, I think, yeah, so that would be withdrawal. So I think that generally goes with my first answer, which is under our proposal, if you, between the time that we certify the ballot, print the names on the ballot, all the way up until Election Day, no matter how you leave as a candidate, whether you withdraw, whether you die, whether you're disqualified, your vacancy committee would be entitled to select an alternative candidate, and that would not be contingent upon whether or not you had another person who was also qualified for that office on the ballot.
Okay, thanks, Ben, for that. Councilmember Black?
I'll stay right here.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so that helps, so thank you. And then I know the reason you are proposing this is that it uses too much paper and that people write in Mickey Mouse. But, so first of all, it is only 4 years, as Alton just reminded us. So it's not every year, it's only every 4 years. And the cost of a special election is pretty great. And so I'm wondering how those balance. And Audrey and I had an email conversation about people writing in Mickey Mouse. So if no one has qualified to be a write-in and someone writes Mickey Mouse, then it shouldn't be a problem because you're not accepting write-ins. So that's a question.
So, well, and I think you make good points, Councilmember Black. Just getting to the Mickey Mouse, I'll just relate something that has happened in our office very recently, which is that we had a person request through Cora, which they're completely entitled to do, to inspect all of our ballots from the year 2020. When you have write-in lines, you have people who write things in, including very often their own name. They put their date of birth. They put their driver's license number. They put personally identifiable information that we are not allowed to show the public under Cora. And so the cost of that, the process that we would have to go through in order to do that is, I guess, just an additional to the fact that I think that the extra paper and the Mickey Mouse stuff, you know, maybe using Mickey Mouse makes it sound kind of goofy, but it's something that takes a pretty considerable amount of time for our office. So I guess that would be my answer, and maybe the clerk has something more.
So the one thing, and if I may, Council President, if I may address that. So it's not necessarily, I'm looking at Councilman Clark when I say this. We don't like to have extra pieces of paper flying around that we don't need to. It saves us ballot space. So it's not necessarily that, but it's also cards. We don't want a 4-card ballot. It's a lot. It's heavy. It's more postage, and it's more print. It is an increase in the budget, the additional card. Every time you have that extra card, we can start narrowing that down with that write-in solution. The problem with Mickey Mouse or Jose Cuervo or whatever you decide to write in that write-in line is that it doesn't just get passed up. It gets kicked out and goes to an adjudication team who have to have eyes on it and have to interpret the intent of the voter. So it is extra staff time as well, and it does create a little bit of a problem in our process. We can do it. We're trained to do it. We train our judges to do this. They're trained by a specialist to recognize signatures and whatnot. So they do that, except it's just more time to be able to do. So time is money. When it comes to, what's on the menu, special elections, I mean, something like this is rare. When I was on the council sitting on your dais, we had a colleague pass away. Mr. Greatly, it was a shocker, but in my humble opinion, I thought we should have had a special election so the voters of that district can actually have candidates that they can question and debate and actually have that process of democracy. Right now, what you saw is what happened in that election. It was a shot clock. It was whoever can get the money to put on a website and get in. And there was 30 candidates. It was a crapshoot. No debates, no anything. For the democratic process, there should not be that, a price tag should not be the barrier. And it just depends. If it's a citywide, mostly for citywide candidates, you're gonna have multiple candidates for mayor's race, for the auditor, things like that. In a district, it just depends on the size of the district in terms of your active voter universe. And so for us, yes, democracy's pricey, but it's what we do. And it's that process that allows people to have the faith in whatever office they're voting for to represent them. So I think for us, we are able to run a special election whenever we need to.
All right, thank you, Clerk Lopez. Councilmember Black, go ahead.
So is your proposal now that we would change the date and have the vacancy committee? Okay. So, I hear, Clerk Lopez, your argument about when Carla Madison passed away and there was a mad rush. I'm not sure about the paper and the staff time, because the special election requires the printing of many more ballots and envelopes and postage, and so I'm not sure that's a win.
There's a difference.
And also the staff time, because the special election takes staff time. But why do staff have to look at a ballot if it says Mickey Mouse if there are no qualified? Oh, Alton knows the answer to that.
It's adjudication.
All right, we're going to have Alton come back.
Hello again, Madam Chair, Alton Dillard. See, what happens with that is the way our system is set up now, if a write-in candidate is certified, they appear in a pull-down during the process that the clerk was talking about. In the old days, any ballot that had a write-in would outstack to a separate stack for a visual confirmation. So even though Mickey Mouse, Jose Cuervo, et cetera, if they appear, it still kicks back even though we don't do the step to pull down to see if it's Smith Jones or somebody who is a certified write-in candidate.
Okay.
But
all right, go ahead, Councilmember.
If no one is a certified candidate, then why do you have to look at them anyway?
It still kicks back because how the ballot is set up, if there is a write-in and there's an actual name of any sort in there, it still goes back to adjudication. We don't have a way of just saying, well, this person's not on the ballot, so it just goes through counting.
I can answer that. So, Councilman, I know where you're getting at, and part of it is determining, adjudication is a process into which we try to determine voter intent. If they did not fill in that ballot correctly, or they made a marking outside of it, a bipartisan team analyzes that and tries to determine voter intent. We can't guarantee that Mickey Mouse is going to be the person that they write in. They can actually mess up on their ballot and the instructions And that's why we ask people before they vote their ballot and fill in the ballot, they read the instructions, because there are instructions on how to correct those errors. Oftentimes people put check marks, oftentimes they'll circle, oftentimes they will write the candidate of their choice because they messed up in the write-in line or alongside of it. So as they do that, we have to be able to determine voter intent, because that is critical to making sure that every single vote is counted, and that when you have something like that, that kicks to adjudication, those voters, that bipartisan team makes that determination. And this is a great opportunity because we do tours, and we've actually asked and organized tours for council members to come and see. And I think a couple of you were at one of those tours last time. Every step in the process, so that you can see how from ballot receiving to signature verification to the point where we're in our tabulation room after prep, and it goes to adjudication. You will actually see folks look at those ballots and be able to make that determination and move forward from there. So it is a process, and it's a very important process to that. So that's why it's there, and that's why we have that team look at it.
Great. We appreciate that, Clerk Lopez. I think the more that we're talking about this, the more that it's helpful for the public to really understand how much intent goes on behind the scenes to ensure that every vote is counted during our election. So appreciate that. Council Pro Tem Torres.
Thank you so much. Just my thoughts as you're bringing up some of the process that takes place in your example when Councilwoman Madison passed away, and what took place in trying to fill that vacancy during that period of time. That strikes me as the textbook example of why you would go back to voters, why you would go back and give voters an opportunity to figure out who are all the folks that are interested in this job. How do I get to know them better, rather than leaving that up to potentially under 1,000 people who determine the outcome of that election in something that can feel very distant from their decision-making process because it wasn't part of the plan right before election day. So that may be, I think, maybe on the spectrum, right? The most intense outcome of how writing candidacy might need to be reformed, but it's there. We've seen it happen in Denver. And so for me, it is less about what are the resources that it takes, but more about what's the voter engagement and awareness process that needs to be built. So just thinking through, I think that piece that we've lived and experienced, one of those circumstances, I think, means we really need to think a little bit differently about how that may play out in the future for Denver. So thank you.
All right, thank you, Council Pro Tem Torres. I don't have anybody else in the queue, and so we'll go ahead and turn it over to Councilmember Black.
Thank you, and thank you, everyone from the clerk's office. So I don't have much more to say, but I would like to hear from you about what you think about this idea that we would create more of a formal council process for ballot measure referrals and to create a timeline to provide more time, make it easier on these folks, and provide more opportunity for the voters. So seems like everyone kind of likes that idea. So all right, well, thank you.
Well, just a moment. We've got Councilmember Sawyer is in the queue, so go ahead, please.
Thanks, Madam President. Nope, just wanted to make sure that I thought for a second we were ending, and we might be, which is fine, but I just wanted to make sure that we circled back to the idea of creating that process. And I am fully in support of it. I think we need to back up the council referral date. I think August 1st, adding that extra 30 days makes a lot of sense given the 4th of July holiday and the fact that it moves. It gets a little hairy to maybe do it on July 1st, but that August 1st date, it makes a lot of sense to me. So if everyone else is in support of that, I think that is something that we should do, and just wanted to say thanks for putting together that timeline, and really appreciate all the work you've done for this. I think the clerk's office has done a lot of moving in terms of, getting a lot of these timelines and these conversations happening, and we should too. Thanks.
Great.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Sawyer. And for those folks who are following along, it's slide 12 in the presentation, and I just appreciate Councilmember Black for you doing all the work around putting these together and leading the discussion here in Budget and Policy, and then, of course, behind the scenes with all of the planning. So supportive of this.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I will try and work to have some kind of a list of ideas, kind of summarizing the things I think this group is on board for. And we have one more meeting scheduled, which is next Monday. And I also want to talk about this other idea that I've talked to some of you about collecting signatures for initiatives and the possibility of requiring that some percentage be collected in every council district to ensure sort of equity in the signature gathering process. So I'll have some more information on that next week. But thank you all very much. If you have any other thoughts, just send them my way. And thank you to Clerk Lopez and to his team. Thanks.
All right, very good. We're going to go ahead and adjourn the meeting, and we'll reconvene the conversation next Monday at 1:30, same location, either here in Chambers or virtually. And so thank you all.